Rasheeda's name has always carried weight in the world of Atlanta drama. But we mean nothing could have prepared fans for the storm that broke when whispers turned into headlines. Rasheeda allegedly invited Jasmine, Kirk's former mistress and the mother of his controversial love child, on a family vacation. The word alone sent shockwaves across social media. Could the boss chick really be extending an olive branch to the very woman who once threatened to destroy her marriage? Or is this just the calm before a reality TV-style hurricane? Fans are still reeling, scrolling and double-tapping in disbelief, because if true, it might be the boldest, most scandalous move Rasheeda has ever made. Imagine it's sun-sand, smiles for the cameraman in the middle of it all. A triangle of tension so thick you could slice it with a diamond ring. Kirk, the man who's tried to sell the world on his version of growth, suddenly finds himself caught between two women who know his past better than anyone. Was this vacation about healing? About keeping enemies close? Or was it just the latest plot twist in Kirk's messy pattern of living a poly-style life in the shadows, only to have it all spill into the daylight when the boss chick's patience finally snapped? Fans are already choosing sides, some praising Rasheeda for her maturity, others dragging her for letting Jasmine anywhere near family territory. And behind closed doors, insiders claim emotions ran high, voices were raised, and certain secrets about Kirk's so-called alternative relationship style came bubbling to the surface at the worst possible time. If you thought the Atlanta streets were quiet, think again, because this isn't just a vacation. This is the scandal of the season. The whispers of Rasheeda inviting Jasmine on a family vacation didn't just stir gossip, they exploded like a bomb across Atlanta's streets, leaving fans gasping at the audacity of it all. And the story only grows messier once you peel back the layers of what really went down when the Frost family decided to take a trip that was supposed to symbolize peace but instead became a powder keg of secrets, hurt feelings, and shocking revelations. Because while the glossy Instagram pictures painted a story of sun-kissed beaches, sparkling pools, and family unity, the truth behind the scenes was far darker. Charged with emotional tension, side-eye glances, and whispered conversations that exposed the fragile foundation Kirk and Rasheeda had been walking on for years. And it all began with Kirk trying to convince Rasheeda that extending the invitation to Jasmine was a sign of growth, of moving past old wounds, a bold attempt to reframe the family narrative and prove to critics that forgiveness was possible. But what Kirk sold as a healing journey felt, to many, like another chapter in his long history of manipulating situations to his advantage, because once Jasmine arrived at the airport, all smiles and carrying her son on her hip, fans couldn't help but notice how awkward Rasheeda's body language was. How forced her smile seemed as cameras captured the moment. And insiders claim Rasheeda's voice had cracked the night before when she confessed to a close friend, "I don't know if I can do this, but I also can't keep living in the shadow of the past. It's time to face it head-on." Yet facing it head-on was easier said than done, when Jasmine's presence immediately unsettled not only Rasheeda but also the older children, who had grown up resenting the scandal that had thrown their family into tabloids and Twitter feeds. And the tension only thickened on the flight as Jasmine, trying to play it cool, leaned toward Kirk to ask about the hotel arrangements, sparking a glare from Rasheeda that could have frozen the Caribbean air before they even landed. Because the boss chick had always been about control, and now it seemed that control was slipping away with every step of this so-called blended family experiment. And once they reached the resort, things spiraled quickly as fans later dissected leaked footage of Jasmine lounging a little too close to Kirk by the pool, while Rasheeda sat stiffly in a lounge chair scrolling her phone, clearly irritated but too proud to cause a scene in front of the kids. Though that restraint shattered on the second day when an argument broke out over dinner, insiders saying Rasheeda slammed her fork on the table and snapped, "You're enjoying this, aren't you? Acting like you belong here when you nearly broke us apart," to which Jasmine, caught between defensiveness and composure, replied, "I'm not here for you, Rasheeda. I'm here for my son, and if you can't see that, maybe this trip was a mistake." And that's when Kirk, visibly sweating under the weight of two women's fury, tried to intervene with his tired lines about family being complicated and wanting everyone to get along. But his attempts only fueled Rasheeda's rage, because to her, Kirk's words felt like gas, an erasure of the years she'd spent piecing herself back together after his betrayal. And in that moment, the dinner table became a battlefield, with children looking down in silence and nearby diners sneaking glances while pretending not to listen. And when Rasheeda stormed off, fans watching the leaked clip online couldn't believe their eyes. flooding the comments with phrases like Rasheeda deserves better and Kirk will never change. While others criticized Rasheeda for even allowing Jasmine on the trip in the first place, calling it a humiliation disguised as maturity. But what fans didn't know was that later that night, behind the closed door of the suite, Kirk and Rasheeda had a heated confrontation where Rasheeda accused him of orchestrating the entire trip as a way to normalize what she called your poly-life experiment, her voice shaking as she shouted, "You've been trying to make me share you for years, Kirk, and I've played along. I've tried to be the bigger person, but this isn't healing. This is you wanting both worlds." And Kirk, cornered, but refusing to admit the truth, muttered, "It's not about that, it's about family. About showing people we can rise above." But his evasive answers only made Rasheeda feel more betrayed. Because deep down she feared that Kirk's growth was just another mask, another way to cover up his refusal to change. And meanwhile, Jasmine, alone in her room, called a friend to vent about how unwelcome she felt, saying, "I knew it was too good to be true. I knew she wasn't ready to see me as anything but the enemy, but I came for my son. I wanted him to have this experience. And now I'm being dragged like I'm the villain again." Her voice cracking as she admitted that part of her still resented Kirk for putting her in the middle of chaos that never truly died down. And the story took another twist when the next morning paparazzi caught Rasheeda and Jasmine having what appeared to be a tense but civil conversation by the beach, with Rasheeda gesturing sharply and Jasmine nodding while holding her son's hand, leading fans to speculate whether a truce was forming or if it was just another calm before the storm. But insiders insist that conversation was anything but peaceful, with Rasheeda allegedly telling Jasmine, "I'll never forget what you did, but I can't keep letting my kids see me hate you," and Jasmine responding, "Then stop looking at me like I'm some homewrecker who wakes up every day to hurt you. I'm just trying to live my life." An exchange that, while civil on the surface, left Rasheeda more unsettled than ever, because while she wanted to project strength and forgiveness, her heart was still chained to the pain Kirk had caused. And as the vacation rolled on, moments of forced smiles for group photos contrasted with whispered arguments behind closed doors. The tension seeping into every activity, from boat rides to beach barbecues, until the final straw came during a night out when Kirk, perhaps emboldened by a few too many drinks, raised a toast and said, "Here's to the women in my life, who make me who I am." A line meant to flatter but instead, igniting fury as Rasheeda slammed her glass down and shouted, "Don't you dare lump me into your twisted fantasy, Kirk. Don't you dare." While Jasmine looked down in embarrassment, clearly wishing she had never accepted the invitation. And the crowd around them gasped, pulling out phones to record. As the scene spiraled, with fans later dragging Kirk online for what they called the most tone-deaf toast in reality TV history. While some accused Rasheeda of finally exposing the truth that Kirk had been living a poly-style arrangement behind the guise of family unity. And by the end of the night, the vacation that was meant to symbolize healing had turned into a public spectacle, one that left the Frost family's reputation more fragile than ever. And as the footage spread online, fans began questioning whether Rasheeda was truly the forgiving matriarch she presented herself to be, or a woman trapped in a cycle of pain, unable to break free, while Jasmine found herself once again branded the intruder, despite her insistence that she only wanted to be there for her son. And the conversations that followed in the hotel corridors made one thing clear. The wounds in this family were far from healed, and the world was about to see just how messy things could get. When private betrayals are dragged into the spotlight of a tropical vacation, the fallout from that disastrous toast lingered like smoke the next morning, heavy and suffocating, because even as the Caribbean sun rose over glittering waves and palm trees swayed gently, there was no peace to be found within the Frost vacation bubble. And while cameras captured smiling selfies and picture-perfect resort shots, behind the lens the air was thick with unspoken resentment, with Rasheeda avoiding Kirk at breakfast, her sunglasses covering eyes still puffy from the tears she shed in silence the night before, and Jasmine keeping her distance, her son innocently splashing in the pool while she sat rigid on the lounge chair, scrolling through the flood of fan reactions online that had already begun to tear her apart for daring to show up on a family trip many believed she had no right to be on. And though Rasheeda tried to keep her composure in front of the children, insiders claim her patience snapped later that morning when she found Kirk chatting quietly with Jasmine near the bar, leaning in close enough to trigger memories of old betrayals. And in that moment, Rasheeda's voice sliced through the humid air as she demanded, "Really, Kirk? Is this your idea of healing? Whispering with her behind my back like nothing ever happened. While Kirk, caught off guard, stammered, "It's not what it looks like. I was just asking her about the kids' schedule." But Rasheeda wasn't buying it, her voice rising as she accused him of using this entire vacation as a facade to normalize his so-called poly lifestyle, and bystanders, sensing drama, began pulling out their phones to capture the confrontation, the clips spreading like wildfire as fans weighed in with their hot takes, some calling Rasheeda a queen for standing her ground, others accusing her of embarrassing herself by staying with Kirk in the first place, and through it all, Jasmine stood frozen, torn between defending herself and staying silent, until finally she broke, her voice trembling but firm as she said, "I didn't ask to be here, Rasheeda, you did. I came for my son, not for Kirk. And if you can't see that, then maybe the problem isn't me." A declaration that sent shockwaves through the group, because for the first time Jasmine wasn't just playing the role of the outsider, she was pushing back, forcing Rasheeda to confront the uncomfortable truth that inviting her had opened doors no one was prepared to walk through. And the tension only deepened that evening when the family gathered for what was supposed to be a calm dinner, because once the plates hit the table, the conversation turned icy, with Rasheeda refusing to look Kirk in the eye, the children whispering nervously, and Jasmine focusing solely on her son, until Kirk, desperate to salvage control, raised his voice and said, "Y'all need to stop acting like this is war. We're supposed to be showing unity," a plea that only backfired as Rasheeda shot back, "Unity? Don't you dare use that word after years of lying and sneaking around. You don't get to redefine family just because it suits your ego." And Jasmine, tired of being painted as the villain, finally snapped, "I've taken every insult, every dirty look, every whisper. And I stayed quiet because I thought it was best for my child, but I'm done being your scapegoat. Rasheeda, I'm not your enemy. Kirk is, and if you can't see that, then maybe you don't want the truth." Words that silenced the entire table, leaving Kirk red-faced and fumbling for excuses while Rasheeda's jaw tightened, because though she wanted to scream, deep down she knew Jasmine wasn't entirely wrong. And that inner conflict became the fuel for the next twist, as the night unraveled into accusations, raised voices, and a dramatic walkout that fans later dubbed the vacation explosion. With Rasheeda storming off into the humid night while Jasmine, shaking with anger, packed her bags, muttering to herself that she never should have come, and Kirk chasing after both women, torn between damage control and his own crumbling facade, while the children sat in stunned silence, realizing the vacation that was supposed to bring everyone together had instead blown their fractured family wide open for the world to see. And the drama only escalated from there, because as the story leaked back home, fans dragged the Frosts mercilessly, accusing Kirk of manipulation, Rasheeda of weakness, and Jasmine of clout chasing, while insiders whispered that what really happened behind closed doors was even uglier. With Rasheeda confronting Kirk in their suite later that night, screaming, "You wanted this all along, didn't you? To parade us both around like trophies so you can keep living your fantasy." And Kirk, exasperated, finally blurting out, "Maybe I just wanted peace, maybe I wanted to prove that we can all exist without tearing each other apart." A statement that Rasheeda laughed bitterly at before replying, "Peace? You don't get peace without accountability, Kirk. And that's something you've never given me." Her voice breaking as years of betrayal poured out in one devastating wave, leaving Kirk stunned into silence. And in the room next door, Jasmine overheard every word through the thin hotel walls, clutching her pillow and whispering to herself that she had been dragged into a mess that could never truly be fixed, a realization that would shape the explosive days to come on this cursed family getaway. By the third day of the trip, whatever illusions of harmony the Frosts tried to sell to cameras had completely unraveled, because while the resort staff smiled politely and fans online speculated about whether Rasheeda and Jasmine were working toward peace, the truth on the ground was chaos barely contained. With Rasheeda's anger simmering just below the surface, Jasmine weighed down by humiliation, and Kirk desperately trying to juggle two ticking time bombs that he himself had set years earlier. And it all came to a head when the family embarked on what was supposed to be a bonding excursion aboard a luxury yacht. A perfect backdrop for Instagram shots, but in reality, a floating stage for the next explosion of drama. Because once the drinks began to flow and the sun sank low, Rasheeda confronted Jasmine again, her voice steady but sharp as she said, "I'm not going to keep pretending everything is fine you sitting here, laughing with him. It feels like you're enjoying watching me struggle." And Jasmine, tired of biting her tongue, shot back, You think too highly of yourself. Rasheeda, I'm not here for you. I've never been here for you. But I'm not going to apologize for existing in a situation Kirk created. And those words hit harder than the waves slapping against the boat, leaving Kirk flustered, mumbling weakly, "This isn't what I wanted, I just wanted us to coexist." But Rasheeda's patience finally cracked, her voice rising as she snapped, "Coexist? That's your excuse for dragging us all into your mess. Kirk, you want to call this family. But it's nothing more than your twisted version of a poly relationship that I never signed up for." And for the first time, fans would later note, Rasheeda actually used the phrase out loud, confirming what so many had whispered online, that Kirk wasn't just a cheater. He was trying to normalize a lifestyle where he could have both women under his control. And Jasmine, caught between shame and defiance, muttered, "At least I never lied about who I was. You knew what he was when you married him." A statement that sent Rasheeda into a fury, because in her mind that was not only disrespectful, it was an attempt to rewrite history. And the argument grew so heated that crew members reportedly asked the captain if they should cut the trip short, but Kirk, panicking, begged them to let it continue, though his pleading was drowned out by Rasheeda shouting, "You will never be part of this." Family, Jasmine, "Not while I'm alive." To which Jasmine, trembling but refusing to back down, fired back, "You don't get to decide what family looks like anymore. Your husband already did that for you." And with that the yacht became a battlefield, children watching in horror as their father tried to pull the women apart, fans later dissecting leaked footage frame by frame. Some siding with Rasheeda's righteous rage, others pointing out that Jasmine was speaking truths no one wanted to hear. And when the yacht docked, Rasheeda stormed off first, sunglasses hiding tears as paparazzi cameras flashed, while Kirk trailed after her begging for forgiveness, leaving Jasmine behind with her son, standing silently against the railing, looking like a woman who wished she could disappear. But the drama didn't end there. Because back at the resort that night, another bombshell erupted when one of Rasheeda's closest friends, who had joined the vacation midway, pulled her aside and revealed that Kirk had allegedly been seen messaging yet another woman just weeks before the trip. A claim that sent Rasheeda spiraling, her worst fears confirmed that Kirk wasn't just stuck in the past but still dabbling in the same patterns. And when she confronted him in their suite, her voice shook with rage as she demanded, "How many women do you need, Kirk? How many before you're satisfied?" And Kirk, cornered, tried to deny it, saying, "It wasn't like that, it was business." But Rasheeda wasn't convinced, throwing his phone at the wall and shouting, "You've been feeding me lies for 20 years, I don't even know who you are anymore." A moment so raw that insiders claim security was nearly called. And in the midst of it all, Jasmine, still reeling from the yacht fight, overheard enough to realize that Kirk's so-called poly tendencies weren't about peace or family, they were about control. About his need to keep women orbiting around him no matter the cost. And when she confided this to another friend, the next morning, she reportedly said, "He doesn't love either of us. Not really, he loves the power of having us both, and we're the fools who keep letting him." Words that, when leaked online, sent fans into a frenzy, dragging Kirk harder than ever and turning the vacation saga into the #1 trending scandal of the week, with hashtags like #KirkExposed and #BossChickDeservesBetter blowing up across Twitter and Instagram. And as the vacation neared its chaotic end, the family dynamic grew more fractured by the hour. Rasheeda debating whether to pack up and leave early, Jasmine refusing to show her face at group activities, and Kirk scrambling to hold on to the facade of unity that had already shattered. But the true climax came during the final dinner, when all three sat down one last time, the air tense and heavy, and Rasheeda, her voice calm but cutting, declared, "This was never about healing, Kirk. This was about you trying to force us into your fantasy, and I refuse to play that role any longer." While Jasmine nodded silently, adding, "For once, I agree with her," and Kirk, looking more defeated than ever, whispered, "I just wanted us to be a family." But his words fell flat. Because the truth was undeniable. Family was more broken than it had ever been. And as fans watched the leaked footage later, their comments told the story best. Kirk's poly dream had finally collapsed under the weight of its own lies, leaving Rasheeda and Jasmine forever changed, and the Frost legacy forever tainted by a vacation that was supposed to bring them together, but instead tore them apart in front of the entire world. By the final days of the so-called family vacation, the tension had become impossible to mask. And what began as a staged attempt at unity now looked more like a slow-motion implosion. Because Rasheeda's patience had been stripped down to its last threads, Jasmine's dignity hung in tatters, and Kirk's image already fragile was being shredded with every passing hour. And the climax came not in a quiet hotel suite but in front of dozens of onlookers at the resort's farewell banquet, where the Frost clan had agreed, reluctantly, to share one last dinner together, but insiders swear the evening turned into one of the ugliest reality TV-style blow-ups fans had ever seen, with emotions spilling over like wine across the linen tablecloths, because while the first few minutes passed in awkward silence, the peace cracked when Kirk, ever the optimist in public, but a coward in private, lifted his glass and said once again, "I know this trip hasn't been easy, but I believe deep down it shows we can survive anything," and Rasheeda, who had been gripping her fork so tightly her knuckles whitened, finally snapped, her voice loud enough for the entire dining hall to hear as she cut him off, saying, "Survive? You call this surviving? You call dragging me and that woman into the same space, humiliating me in front of my children, surviving?" And the room fell still, forks clattering as guests turned to watch the storm explode. While Kirk stammered, "It's about family, it's about showing the world we can rise above." But Rasheeda wasn't having it, her voice trembling with years of bottled-up hurt as she shouted, "Stop using the word family to cover up your mess, Kirk, because this isn't family. This is you trying to live your fantasy of having us both like we're part of your collection." And Jasmine, who had been quiet, suddenly stood up, tears in her eyes but fury in her voice as she said, "Don't put this on me, Rasheeda. I didn't ask to be her who invited me, and now you're treating me like I orchestrated the whole thing, but the truth is, Kirk is the one who wanted this, not me. And I'm tired of being painted as the villain," and her words echoed across the hall, setting off gasps as cameras flashed and cell phones recorded, because here was Jasmine, calling it out plain, admitting what fans had speculated for years, that Kirk's so-called maturity was nothing more than him trying to sell his poly lifestyle as a version of growth. And Rasheeda's response was a mix of rage and heartbreak as she hissed, "Don't you dare play victim. Jasmine, you knew what you were doing when you laid down with my husband. And I will never forget that." But Jasmine, trembling, held her ground, firing back, "And you knew who he was when you took him back every time. So don't act like I'm the only one to blame." And with that the banquet hall erupted. Voices raised, children crying, guests whispering, some cheering, Rasheeda on others nodding at Jasmine's words, while Kirk sat in the middle, sweating, his face a mask of defeat, as he muttered, "Y'all are destroying everything we've built," but his voice was drowned out by Rasheeda declaring, "No, Kirk, you destroyed it the moment you thought you could play husband, father, and king of your own twisted harem," and Jasmine adding, "This isn't healing, this is hell." And the footage, when it leaked online, became the most talked-about clip of the year. Fans dragging Kirk mercilessly, some siding with Rasheeda's righteous anger, others admitting Jasmine's brutal honesty hit harder than anyone expected. But the damage was done, because the vacation ended with Rasheeda packing her bags in silence, Jasmine leaving early with her son, and Kirk left alone in the hotel lobby, begging producers not to let the footage air. But it was too late, the story had already gone viral, the hashtags multiplying, the memes relentless, the Frost family brand collapsing under the weight of scandal, betrayal, and a failed attempt at blending lives that were never meant to blend. And as planes departed and the sun set on that cursed getaway, one thing was clear: what was meant to be a chapter of forgiveness would forever be remembered as the trip that exposed Kirk's truth, shattered Rasheeda's patience, and forced Jasmine to finally speak her side, leaving fans divided, emotions raw, and the Frost family legacy more complicated than ever. A reminder that sometimes a vacation isn't a break from reality, it's the place where reality hits hardest, and nothing will ever be the same again. The more the DNA test results lingered in the air, the heavier the silence became inside Jasmine's home. Even the soft hum of the refrigerator and the faint ticking of the wall clock felt intrusive, as though the house itself was bracing for the storm that was about to break. Jasmine sat hunched on the couch, her hands trembling as she gripped the test report. Her nails dug into the paper, wrinkling it, as if she could crush the truth into dust. Kirk stood by the window, arms folded across his chest, his jaw tight with a mix of anger and defensiveness. Rasheeda leaned against the wall, her face pale, but her voice steady enough to slice through the tension. "So now we know. This wasn't just speculation, Kirk. This is real. This is your child." Jasmine's eyes burned with tears as she glanced at Rasheeda, her lips parting in disbelief. You think I wanted this? You think I planned for my baby to become the center of your marriage, falling apart? Her voice cracked, but it carried the weight of months of suppressed fear. Kirk turned sharply, his voice booming. Don't twist this, Jasmine. You kept me in the dark too. You had months to tell me. Instead, you let everyone around us speculate, tear each other apart, and feed off rumors. You had the power to stop this before it got this far. Jasmine shot back. And what about you, Kirk? You were the one sneaking around. You were the one splitting yourself between two worlds. Don't stand there and make me the villain when you're the one who lied to everyone. Rasheeda's hand clenched at her side, her knuckles white. She had heard enough of the blame game. This isn't about who lied more. It's about the fact that a child is involved. A child that deserves honesty, not this circus of secrets. Her voice trembled, but her eyes stayed sharp, moving from Kirk to Jasmine. Both of you need to decide right now what matters more, protecting your pride or doing right by this baby. The room was thick with unspoken truths. Every word Rasheeda spoke forced Kirk to look down, his shoulders sagging under the weight of choices he could no longer run from. Jasmine wiped her tears with the back of her hand, her breathing ragged, her voice quiet but cutting. So what happens now, Rasheeda? Do you leave him? Do you take everything from him? Or do you keep pretending this marriage can survive with me and my baby haunting it? Rasheeda's chest rose and fell, and for a moment, no one spoke. The question hung in the air like a verdict waiting to be read. Kirk opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He was stuck in a purgatory of his own making, and for the first time, he looked truly broken. The storm that had been brewing around Kirk, Rasheeda, and Jasmine did not calm down after the so-called family vacation drama ended. It only grew sharper, spreading into every corner of their lives until it became impossible to separate personal wounds from public spectacle, and every conversation, every whispered remark, carried the weight of betrayal, suspicion, and raw human emotion that no camera could fully capture. Rasheeda, who had once convinced herself that strength meant silence, now found herself unable to keep quiet, pacing the halls of her home at night, replaying the sight of Jasmine sitting comfortably at a dinner table meant for her family, a table she had guarded for years with loyalty and sacrifice. And in those hours she asked herself how many times she had chosen forgiveness only for Kirk to twist it into permission. How many times she had swallowed her pride to keep the family together, only for that same family to now feel like a crumbling stage set, where she was the only actor still trying to hold up the backdrop. Jasmine, on the other hand, was no longer satisfied being the outsider who caused whispers. She wanted recognition, a seat not only at the table but in the family narrative itself. And as twisted as it was, her confidence grew each time she saw Kirk hesitate to push her away, each time she saw the faintest flicker of consideration in his eyes. When she mentioned their child's right to know his siblings properly, as though that justified her insertion into Rasheeda's carefully built world, and the more the fans dragged her online, the more she doubled down, posting cryptic captions about truth always winning and healing family ties, while smirking into her phone like she had already written the ending. Kirk, caught between these two women, pretended in public to be the calm mediator, but privately he was cracking his phone buzzed nonstop with messages from producers milking the scandal, his children asking awkward questions about Jasmine's presence, and his own conscience reminding him that every small decision he had made in the shadows had now snowballed into a spotlight so blinding that even he could not spin his way out of it. And yet, instead of facing the mess with honesty, he clung to half-truths, feeding Rasheeda lines about just trying to do right by everyone while whispering reassurances to Jasmine that things would settle soon. And the result was a man who no longer belonged fully to either side but drifted, restless, guilty, still unable to admit that his indecision was the very fire keeping this chaos alive. The fans, of course, devoured it, turning every leaked photo, every shaky video clip, into proof of betrayal or signs of reconciliation depending on whose side they were on. With Twitter threads analyzing Rasheeda's facial expressions when Jasmine spoke, Instagram comments dissecting Kirk's body language when he stood near either woman, and YouTube reaction channels running hour-long breakdowns of the vacation footage as though they were studying political scandals. And in that frenzy, the truth itself became irrelevant. It no longer mattered what Kirk had actually promised or what Rasheeda had really agreed to, because the story was bigger than them now, a living soap opera where every fan felt entitled to pass judgment, to demand answers, to scream that Rasheeda should finally leave, or that Jasmine should stop clinging, or that Kirk should man up and pick a side once and for all. And as the days turned into weeks, the three of them began to realize that the family drama they thought they could control for the sake of appearances had slipped completely beyond their grasp. That the cameras were not just documenting their reality but shaping it, amplifying every wound until even private conversations sounded like rehearsed monologues, and that the idea of healing or moving on might be nothing more than a mirage. Because what happens when a family's fractures become entertainment? When forgiveness itself is packaged as plot twists, and when the very people who should be clinging together in private instead learn to perform their pain for an audience that cheers louder with every new betrayal, does anyone truly recover from that? Or do they simply keep acting until the cameras find another family to consume? The fallout from the so-called family vacation did not fade when the cameras stopped rolling. In fact, it grew into something larger than any of them could have anticipated. Stretching into Rasheeda's every waking thought, seeping into Jasmine's social media strategies, haunting Kirk each time he tried to play the role of the calm patriarch, and igniting fans who are more invested than ever in dissecting every breath, every glance, every line of dialogue that slipped out of their mouths. Rasheeda, for all her years of composure, now felt her patience shredding thread by thread, and though she plastered on a smile for the public, at home she was pacing floors, slamming doors, shouting into her phone with close friends about how much more she was supposed to take. And her tone revealed a woman caught between dignity and despair, replaying Jasmine's smirk at the dinner table like a wound that refused to close. Because to Rasheeda it wasn't just about another woman sitting across from her, it was about years of sacrifice suddenly mocked, about children she had raised now looking at her sideways because they weren't sure who to believe, and about the gnawing thought that maybe forgiveness had only encouraged Kirk to stretch boundaries until she was living inside a circus tent instead of a home. Jasmine, emboldened by the uproar, leaned harder into the chaos, posting cryptic selfies captioned with phrases like "Truth never hides forever" and "Family isn't about titles. It's about love," throwing gasoline on a fire she secretly enjoyed, because every hateful comment meant attention. Every dragged hashtag meant her name was trending, and when she went live to address the situation with a sly smile, sipping wine while brushing her hair off her shoulder, she delivered lines like "Y'all can be mad, but I'm here because my son deserves his spot," as if she were auditioning for a role in a soap opera, leaving fans equal parts outraged and fascinated. Kirk, for his part, stumbled between the two women like a man lost in his own maze, telling Rasheeda in private that he just